When billionaire Richard Harrington publicly refused to shake Janelle Morrison's hand at the tech summit, the room went silent. She was the CEO of the fastest-growing AI company in America. He thought she was nobody. What she did in the next 48 hours didn't just prove him wrong, it destroyed him. Janelle Morrison was 29 years old when she became one of the most talked-about CEOs in Silicon Valley. 4 years earlier, she'd been a software engineering student at Stanford, writing code in her dorm room at 3 in the morning, fueled by cheap coffee and an idea that wouldn't let her sleep. That idea became NexGen AI. What started as a class project evolved into a revolutionary artificial intelligence platform. While other companies were focused on consumer applications and chatbots, Janelle saw something different. She saw the potential for AI to transform healthcare, to detect patterns in medical data that human doctors might miss, to save lives by catching diseases years before symptoms appeared. By the time she graduated, she had 3 patents pending and a prototype that made venture capitalists sit up and take notice. She dropped out of her master's program to run the company full-time. Her parents, both public school teachers in Atlanta, had been terrified. But they'd also taught her to bet on herself. 4 years of 18-hour days, countless rejections, and near-bankruptcy moments had built NexGen AI into a company valued at $500 million. They had 40 employees, partnerships with 2 major hospitals, and technology that was genuinely changing how diseases were diagnosed. Now Janelle had received the invitation she'd been working towards since day one. The Global Tech Summit in San Francisco. It was the most exclusive gathering in the industry, where billion-dollar deals were made over coffee and handshakes, where the future of technology was decided by the people who had the power and money to shape it. This was her moment. The company was ready to scale, and she needed the right partner. Someone with the resources and network to take NexGen AI global. Someone who understood that what she'd built wasn't just valuable. It was essential. She had no idea that the biggest challenge wouldn't be her pitch. It would be getting people to see past her age and her skin color long enough to hear it. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel had been transformed into a networking paradise for the ultra-wealthy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over circles of men in expensive suits, and a handful of women in designer wear, all holding champagne flutes and discussing valuations, acquisitions, and market disruptions. Janelle entered wearing a tailored navy blue suit that had cost more than her first month's rent from 4 years ago. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every step forward through relentless work and undeniable results. But she was immediately aware of being different. She was the youngest person in the room by at least a decade. She was one of maybe 15 women among 200 attendees. And she was one of only 6 black executives present, a fact she'd clocked within her first 5 minutes of arrival. This wasn't new. She'd been the only one of few in countless rooms throughout her career. In her computer science classes, in pitch meetings with venture capitalists, at industry conferences, she'd learned to use it as fuel rather than let it become a barrier. The summit was structured around presentations, panel discussions, and what they called organic networking opportunities, which really meant strategic conversations where deals got done. Janelle had a presentation slot scheduled for that afternoon, but the real work happened in moments like these. Introductions, handshakes, the 30-second pitch that made someone want to hear more. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped into the crowd. She'd worked too hard and come too far to let intimidation stop her now. Several attendees glanced her way, their eyes lingering a moment too long before moving on. She was used to that too. She just needed one person to actually listen. One person to see the value of what she'd built. Then Richard Harrington walked into the room. Richard Harrington was a legend in Silicon Valley. At 56 years old, he'd built his fortune through early investments in 3 companies that became household names. His net worth was estimated at $8 billion. When he spoke, people listened. When he invested, Markets moved. He was known for his sharp instincts, his aggressive negotiation tactics, and his public statements about only backing disruptive innovators who break all the rules. He'd given TED Talks. He'd been on the cover of Forbes 6 times. He had the kind of influence that could make or break a young company. Janelle had studied his investment history. He'd backed several AI companies in the past, though none in the healthcare space. He was exactly the kind of investor who could understand NexGen AI's potential and have the resources to scale it globally. She watched him move through the room, people gravitating toward him like planets around the sun. She waited for the right moment, then approached with her practiced confidence. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice clear and professional. "I'm Janelle Morrison, CEO of NexGen AI. I'd love to tell you about the work we're doing in healthcare diagnostics. I think it aligns perfectly with your interest in disruptive technology." She extended her hand for a handshake. Harrington. On's eyes flicked down to her outstretched hand, then up to her face. His expression shifted from polite attention to something cold and dismissive. He didn't take her hand. Instead, he looked past her, as if searching for someone more important to talk to. "I don't waste time with affirmative action, hires playing CEO," he said, his voice loud enough that the people nearby could hear. "If your company was actually valuable, you wouldn't need to approach people at conferences." He turned and walked away, leaving Janelle standing there with her hand still extended. The conversations around them had stopped. People were staring. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked away quickly, pretending they hadn't witnessed it. The silence was deafening. Janelle's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Heat flooded her face. Every instinct screamed at her to respond, to defend herself, to call out his blatant disrespect and racism in front of everyone watching. But she'd learned something important over the past 4 years. Anger, justified as it might be, would only confirm whatever assumptions people like Harrington had already made about her. They wanted her to react emotionally, to prove she didn't belong in these rooms. She lowered her hand slowly. Her expression remained calm, composed, almost serene. "Your loss, Mr. Harrington," she said quietly, her voice steady. Then she turned and walked away with her head high, her posture perfect, as if nothing significant had happened. The crowd began to murmur again, conversations resuming in hushed tones. But several people were watching her with new interest. Her grace under pressure had said more than any argument could have. 2 younger investors, a woman from Singapore and a man from Berlin, approached her within minutes. "That was handled with impressive composure," the woman said. "I'm Maya Chen from Horizon Ventures. I'd very much like to hear about NexGen AI. And I'm Stefan Weber, Weber Capital," the man added. "Your company was on my radar already, but after seeing how you just conducted yourself, I'm even more interested in learning what you're building." Janelle smiled, professional and warm, pushing down the anger still simmering beneath her surface. "I'd be happy to tell you," she said. "Though you should know, you'll get the full picture during my presentation this afternoon. I promise it's worth staying for." She exchanged business cards with both of them, her hands steady despite everything. She wasn't here for Richard Harrington's approval. She was here to change the world, and she was just getting started. 3 hours later, Janelle stood on the main stage in front of 200 of the most powerful people in technology. The lights were bright. The screen behind her displayed the NexGen AI logo, and her presentation remote felt solid in her hand. This was what she'd prepared for. This was where technical excellence and vision spoke louder than prejudice. 4 years ago, she began, her voice clear and confident. "My mother's best friend died from ovarian cancer that was detected too late. She'd had symptoms for months, but by the time doctors found it, the disease had spread too far for treatment to work. I wondered, what if we could catch it earlier? What if artificial intelligence could see patterns in medical data that humans miss?" The room was silent, listening. She walked them through NexGen AI's breakthrough technology. Their system analyzed thousands of data points, blood work, imaging, genetic markers, even patterns in patient-reported symptoms that seemed unrelated. Their AI had been trained on millions of anonymized medical records and could detect early warning signs of diseases like cancer, heart disease, and neurological conditions years before a conventional diagnosis. Then came the live demonstration. On the screen, she showed real case studies, anonymized patients whose diseases NexGen AI had flagged 18 to 36 months before clinical symptoms appeared. Patients who were now in treatment early enough that their prognosis was excellent. Lives saved by catching problems early. The audience leaned forward. Phones came out to take photos of the data slides. She could see the shift happening in real time, from polite attention to genuine excitement. She concluded with their vision: partnerships with healthcare systems globally, making early detection available to everyone, not just those who could afford the best doctors and hospitals. When she finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. People stood. Questions came rapid fire from investors, hospital administrators, and tech executives. Even Richard Harrington was watching from the back of the room, his expression unreadable. Janelle had just proven exactly who she was and what she'd built. The moment Janelle stepped off the stage, she was surrounded. 3 major venture capital firms wanted immediate meetings. A healthcare technology CEO from Germany requested a private dinner to discuss European expansion. The CTO of a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company asked about licensing opportunities. Maya Chen, who'd approached her after the Handshake incident, was insistent. "My firm wants to lead your Series C round. Whatever you're looking for, we'll match it." But the most interesting approach came from Elena Vasquez. Elena was a self-made billionaire who'd built tech venture capital into one of the most successful investment firms in the world. She was 52, brilliant and known for 2 things: betting on revolutionary technology early and backing founders who others underestimated. She'd made billions by investing in 3 companies that scale. Pittix had written off, all led by women and minorities. Morrison, Elena said, cutting through the crowd with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. "That was the most impressive presentation I've seen in 5 years. I'd like to discuss a partnership that goes beyond typical VC funding. Can we talk tomorrow morning?" Janelle's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd hoped for. Not just money, but a strategic partner who understood what she was building. "I have meetings scheduled all day tomorrow," Janelle said, pulling out her phone to check her calendar. Her assistant had already booked 7 meetings based on responses to her presentation. "Breakfast then," Elena said with a slight smile. 6:30, before your day starts. Hotel restaurant. 6:30 works, Janelle agreed. As Elena walked away, Janelle noticed Richard Harrington watching from across the room. He said something to his assistant, who quickly typed on a tablet. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. An email from Harrington's office requesting a meeting to discuss potential investment opportunities in NexGen AI. Janelle looked up and met his eyes across the room. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge him. She simply turned back to the investors actually interested in her work. The next morning, Janelle woke at 5:30 to prepare for her meeting with Elena. She reviewed her pitch deck, ran through financial projections, and mentally prepared for the most important conversation of her career. At 6:15, her assistant called. "Janelle, Richard Harrington's team has reached out 3 times since yesterday. They're requesting a meeting today. They say it's urgent. How should I respond?" Janelle thought about the handshake he'd refused, the affirmative action hire comment that still burned, the public humiliation in front of 200 people. "Tell them my schedule is completely full," she said calmly. "They're saying Harrington himself wants to meet. They're offering to work around your schedule. My answer stands. Schedule is full." She headed downstairs for her meeting with Elena, her mind focused and clear. The breakfast meeting was extraordinary. Elena didn't just understand the technology, she understood the vision. They talked for 2 hours about global expansion, regulatory pathways, strategic partnerships with healthcare systems. Elena saw NexGen AI not as a software company, but as infrastructure for the future of medicine. As they finished their meeting and walked through the lobby, Richard Harrington was sitting in one of the leather chairs near the entrance. When he saw them, he stood quickly and approached. "Ms. Morrison," he said, extending his hand with a practiced smile. "I've been hoping to catch you. I'd love to discuss." Janelle looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, the same way he'd looked at her yesterday. She didn't take his hand. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice professionally cool, "I don't waste time with people who judge potential by skin color instead of substance. I'm sure you understand." She walked past him, Elena beside her, leaving him standing there with his hand extended. The lobby wasn't crowded, but the few people present had noticed, including someone filming on their phone, a young journalist who'd been covering the summit. Janelle didn't look back. She had a billion-dollar deal to close, and no time for people who'd already shown her exactly who they were. 48 hours after Richard Harrington refused her handshake, Janelle Morrison stood in a conference room in tech venture capital's San Francisco headquarters signing the largest deal of her career. Elena Vasquez's firm was investing $3 billion into NexGen AI, $2 bill, Lion in direct capital and $1 billion in resources, partnerships, and infrastructure. In exchange, tech venture would receive 30% equity, while Janelle retained full operational control as CEO. The deal included provisions for global expansion, partnerships with healthcare systems in 12 countries, and a clear pathway to making their technology accessible to underserved communities. It was the largest investment in healthcare AI that year. More than that, it was structured in a way that prioritized impact over quick returns. Elena understood that changing healthcare was a long game, and she was committed to playing it. "You built something remarkable," Elena said as they shook hands after signing, "and you did it while facing barriers that most founders never have to deal with. That tells me more about your leadership than any pitch deck ever could." The press conference was held that afternoon. Every major tech publication sent reporters. The news spread instantly. 29-year-old black female CEO secures $3 billion deal, becomes one of youngest $1 billion deal, becomes one of youngest $1 billion company leaders in tech history. Social media exploded. The story wasn't just about the money, it was about what the money represented. A black woman in tech, building revolutionary technology, overcoming blatant discrimination, and succeeding at the highest level. Within hours, #Janelle Morrison was trending. Women in tech were sharing their own stories of being dismissed and underestimated. Young black girls were posting about seeing themselves in her success. The business community was analyzing the deal structure and praising Elena's investment strategy. And then someone leaked the video. A journalist who'd been at the summit posted footage of Richard Harrington refusing Janelle's handshake. The audio was clear enough to hear his affirmative action hire comment. The video of Janelle walking. She passed him in the hotel lobby 2 days later was posted alongside it. The videos went viral within hours. Millions of views. Tens of thousands of comments. And Richard Harrington's world began to crumble. The backlash was immediate and devastating. By that evening, #Harrington Handshake was trending on every platform. Tech journalists published think pieces about racism in Silicon Valley. Former employees of Harrington's companies began sharing their own stories of discrimination and toxic culture. Companies that had partnerships with his investment firm started issuing statements about reviewing relationships and not aligning with those values. Harrington's board of directors called an emergency meeting. His investors demanded explanations. 3 companies he'd planned to acquire publicly withdrew from negotiations, citing incompatible values and leadership philosophies. He tried to issue an apology, posted to his social media channels, "I deeply regret my behavior toward Ms. Morrison. It was unprofessional and does not reflect my true values. I have reached out to apologize personally and wish her continued success. But it was too late. The internet had already made its judgment." His apology was seen as damage control, not genuine remorse. People pointed out that he'd only apologized after she secured a massive deal, after she'd proven her worth on terms he couldn't ignore. Within a week, he lost 3 major deals worth a combined $500 million. 2 companies removed him from their boards. A university rescinded an honorary degree. The TED organization quietly removed his talks from their main platform. His reputation, built over decades, collapsed in days. Industry publications ran retrospectives analyzing his investment patterns, finding that he'd systematically passed on companies led by women and minorities, many of which went on to become hugely successful with other investors. His gut instinct for talent, it turned out, was actually just bias in disguise. The Stanford Business School, where he'd lectured for years, announced he would no longer be invited to speak. His philanthropic foundation saw a wave of board resignations. Richard Harrington had spent 30 years building influence in Silicon Valley. He'd thought himself untouchable, able to treat people however he wanted because of his money and power. One refused handshake captured on video and shared with the world proved otherwise. Meanwhile, Janelle Morrison's company continued to grow, and she was just getting started. 6 months after that tech summit, NexGen AI was valued at $5 billion. Their technology was being implemented in healthcare systems across North America, Europe, and Asia. Early detection rates for major diseases had improved by 30% in pilot programs. Lives were being saved every single day because of what Janelle had built. She became the youngest Black woman to reach billionaire status in the technology sector. But that wasn't what mattered most to her. She launched the Morrison Foundation, providing full scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing STEM degrees. She partnered with HBCUs to create pipeline programs for tech careers. She made sure that the healthcare systems serving low-income communities got access to NexGen AI's technology at reduced rates. Richard Harrington's influence in Silicon Valley had diminished significantly. He still had money, but his voice no longer carried weight. The handshake he'd refused became a case study in business schools about the cost of bias and the importance of recognizing talent regardless of who delivers it. Janelle kept the video of that moment saved on her phone, not to celebrate his downfall, but to remind herself of something important. The people who underestimate you based on your appearance are revealing their own limitations, not yours. She'd extended her hand in good faith, offering an opportunity for partnership. He judged her by her age and skin color instead of her achievements and vision. 2 days later, she secured the deal of the decade. 6 months later, she was changing the world. Sometimes the best response to prejudice isn't anger, it's undeniable success. The handshake he refused became the moment that changed everything, just not in the way he'd expected.